Hey everybody, Tommy here, World at War Comics, and I have another amazing guest. But before we jump into that, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Make sure you share this with everybody. I'm hoping that we are bringing you some really cool stories from amazing creators. All right, without further ado, my next guest is Ram V. You know him from his long run on Detective Comics, but he has done everything from Catwoman to right now doing the New Gods for DC All In. And today, what just dropped is the Black Label Resurrection Man, which I suggest you pick up. I had a blast reading that. All right, without further ado, here is Ram V, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks, everybody. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to World at War Comics. I have another amazing guest, Mr. Ram V, artist, creator extraordinaire. Ram, just looking at the list of things that you've been able to touch over the last, I don't know, 10 years plus,
Yeah,
from Batman to, I mean, you've touched a lot of iconic characters. But before we jump into your career, man, how are you doing? How are things going with you?
I'm okay. A bit overworked, a bit tired, but seems par for the course. I
Yeah.
enjoy what I do, and that means sometimes I take on a little bit more than I should. Um, yeah, otherwise good. It's summer here in England, or as close to summer as we get. So I've been enjoying the weather these past couple of days.
Well, that's good. I think in London, are you in London? Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
area? Yeah, it gets
yeah.
pretty cold during the winters, doesn't it?
It just gets more miserable. I've been to places that are colder. Like I lived on the East Coast for a long time,
Yeah.
and lived in Philadelphia and New York, and they definitely get colder than London does.
Yeah.
Um, but London just feels more miserable when it's cold, just because it doesn't stop raining, and it's
Okay.
just kind of non-committal, misty, weepy rain, and so you're just always a little bit bundled up and miserable. Especially during the winter. But that has its charms. It's
Yeah.
conducive to staying indoors and writing. So
There you go. There you go. That probably works perfect for you then.
yeah.
Well, let's jump in. I always ask this question, and I'm always, I'd love to learn where the passion for storytelling began in your life. And
Mhm.
if you could help me with that answer and let me know, maybe was there someone in your life that really helped to support that passion for writing or even encourage you in it?
Um, well, I used to write when I was a kid. But my love of storytelling probably comes from my father and being just surrounded by non-professional storytellers from very young age. It's one of those things where you think you're responsible for everything you do, and then you realize later on you have so many influences. Like my granduncle was a professional was a mechanical engineer by profession, but a semi-amateur magician, and later, as I would come to understand, a bit of a con man. And Yeah, I think some of my earliest memories of storytelling are listening to stories from him. Like, I remember he had lost three fingers in a shop accident,
Oh, wow.
and so all the kids would always around the house would always be like, "Where did your three fingers go?" And he'd be like, "Well, I traded them in so I could do magic." And so it was stuff like that, and I grew up around that kind of storytelling, that kind of stuff, and so. I imagine that's where a lot of the love of storytelling comes from. I used to get in trouble for telling white lies as a kid. Like it would never be something as banal as like, my dog ate my homework. No, it would be like, I met this alien on my way out from school, and so I forgot to do my homework. Um, there would always be stuff like that, and so it probably comes from there. I'd always been writing since I was a kid. I remember as early as 12 or 13, I'd written a cheap knockoff of Lord of the Rings just because I'd been so enamored with reading the book first at that age. And I never stopped since then. I've been writing pretty much since then. I studied to be a chemical engineer, and then I think 2013 or 2014 is when I first went, you know what? I'm really not enjoying this chemical engineering stuff. I want to do something I feel passionate about. And so I just started writing. I think I published my first professional book in 2016 um, via Kickstarter, and then that was Black Mamba, which was my first graphic novel. And then pretty much every year, I've had some work of note. come out from then on.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, you've even been nominated for an Eisner and a Harvey, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
and a
pretty
Ringo,
impressive.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
an LA Times Book Award this year. So yeah,
oh, congratulations. I didn't know about that
yeah,
one. That's awesome,
thank
man.
you,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I mean that helps solidify that you made the right move from chemical engineer to writing
Yeah,
major.
it's creatively like it's such a vulnerable thing to do, right? Like when you create something, regardless of whether you do it professionally or not, even if you're like drawing something in a book as a kid, you're running up to someone and going, "Hey, what do you think?" And sure, your mom and dad think you always do stuff that's great, but doing that on a bigger scale, putting that out into the world and going, do other people think this is any good? And then when you get responses like, oh, I haven't stopped crying since I read this book, like you know you're getting an emotional response, which is always great.
As you start to write bigger and more, I don't know if important is the right word, but specifically Batman. I mean, you have Spider-Man on the Marvel universe and you have Batman on the
Mhm.
DC universe. That's about as big as it gets. As you start to write those type of characters, how do you manage the fan response? Because every writer goes through that, right? Either someone really loves it or they absolutely hate it. Do you stop like paying so much attention to that and not allow it to bother you? I always ask writers this because, like you said, you're being vulnerable and you're putting something out there, and
Yeah.
the more popular the character, the more people are reading that, probably the more
Yeah.
feedback that you're getting. I don't
Yeah.
know how you manage that as you continue to succeed and get all
I
these
mean,
titles.
the flip side of that vulnerability is also you develop an ego, right? And I don't mean in a negative sense. I don't mean unearned pride or vanity. I mean an
Yeah.
ego in that every time I sit down at my desk and I start typing, I go like, okay, few thousand people or tens of thousands of people are gonna pay money to buy this. And so instead of going, and so I value all of their opinions, the ego within me goes, no, that means I must work hard enough to have something meaningful and important to say. Um, and so there's obviously two ways you can go, right? You can go what people believe is important, and so I must listen to what everyone has to say, in which case you're just crowdsourcing your creativity. Then why are you the one doing it? If you're just going to listen to 100 other people telling you what to do, then why is it your name on the cover, right?
Really good
Um,
point.
and so my view is if you're going to expect people to pay money for it and read it and create commercial art, then at least on an individual level, you must believe that your art is valuable and you must work hard to make sure that you have something meaningful and important to say. Um, and so, uh, as you said, as I've written more popular books, there's always been a crowd response, and I always find it funny. There's always one breed of reader who's like, yeah, but this guy gets paid to write what I want him to write, and so he must hold my opinions important. And I go, well, that's not how it works. I get paid to write what I want to write because I didn't start off at DC or Marvel. I
Right.
just made my own stuff. And then they came to me and they said, we enjoy what you do. Can you come do it over here? And so technically, from my point of view, I just get paid to do what I want to do. It just so happens that what I want to do is interesting enough for people to enjoy it and read it. Um, and so that's how I approach it. Sometimes people think I'm egotistical because of that, but so be it. Creating art was never a democracy. So
That's a good point. I like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, um, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was just reflecting on your career. Um, how do you set goals for yourself? And when you look at your career, are there some goals that you still haven't attained that you're working toward? Or have you been able to meet most of the goals maybe that you started when you sought out to write? And was DC and Marvel always the goal?
Um, I don't believe in that kind of goals because really the first question you want to answer is like, what do you want to do with your career, right? if you want to earn a lot of money and become a commercial success and work on a bunch of popular properties, that's not really writing, is it? That's popularity. And like, don't get me wrong, you're achieving popularity through writing, but the popularity is the goal then. For me, it's always been the writing that's been the goal. And the popularity and success and getting paid and all of that is a byproduct of when you do good work when you're writing. And so you have to be, in my opinion, you have to be very careful when you make your goals because it's very easy to make the byproduct the goal. Can you imagine if I was not a writer? Say I was a factory that produced things,
Hmm.
and when you produce good furniture, sawdust is your byproduct. Now imagine me going, I want to produce the most amount of sawdust I can, just because I can sell that as like, I don't know, chicken feed or whatever.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very careful because it's easy to do that with commercial writing as well. Like my goal is I want to sell so many copies. I want to write this character. Yeah, but don't you want to do it well?
Yeah.
Don't you want to? Because those are two separate things. And so very early on, my friend, a very close friend of mine, an architect in India, had asked me this question: "What is your goal when it comes to writing comics?" And I had said, like the Vertigo kid that I was, I had said I wanted to write Hellblazer. If I am one of those guys, Morrison, Delano, Ennis, Ellis, Moore, all of those guys who wrote Hellblazer, if I'm one in that list, Azzarello, then I would consider myself like I've achieved the goal. Um, about a month and a half after I said that, they canceled the Hellblazer book. But it was funny. Like at the time, he had said to me, "You will get to a point one day where your goal is just to make the next good book." And I think I got to that point pretty early on. I think somewhere around doing Blue and Green, I just realized that yeah, this is good enough. Like creativity is not a sport. You don't have to put something on a higher scale because that's not how art works. One type of art is not inherently or objectively better than another. You just want to explore new things. And as long as I am excited about what I'm doing next, and as long as I can do that without worrying about, am I going to pay the bills? Are my family stable? As long as those things are taken care of, the byproducts, if you will, then the goal is just to make the next book.
That's exciting. Uh, Is there a title then that, although might not be a goal, that maybe you have a story for, and if you ever got that opportunity, you would love to bring that story? Or do you wait for the title and then build a story around it?
I've done both. I think my own work is inherently more successful when I go to editors with an idea and they just let me do it. So Resurrection Man, as an example, is an idea I had in 2019.
Really?
Um, yeah. And at the time, I'd walked into Jamie Rich's office, and Jamie Rich was the editor then. And I said, I have this great pitch. It's like Morrison. It's like more blah, blah, blah. And then he looked at him and went, yeah, you're right. It is like Morrison. I don't understand a single word of what you have on your pitch. Um, but very kindly, he had said, look, this is a character that doesn't have a huge following that, you know, not a lot of people know. Like, come back to this one when you have some juice, when people are going to pick up this book because you're writing it. Um, which was a good thing for me because a part of my brain went, okay, cool. So that's how you do it. You have your ideas and then you do work that's good enough to where editors are like, whatever you want to do, that's cool. And I feel like in some places that's true. I have had the ability to go to editors and convince them to take risks just because I want to do them. Um, but then in the case of things like, doing a detective book or a Catwoman thing, those were opportunities that came across my table and they went, do you have a take? And then I had to figure out a take.
Is one harder than the other? Like when they give
Um,
you a title, like how difficult is that then to start thinking about a story? And what is your process?
I'm gonna quote Kieran Gillen. when it comes to this. Kieran's a very wise man when it comes to balancing create your own stuff with superhero stuff. Um, and he said to me, the challenge with the creator own stuff is that you care intensely about what you're doing. And then you have to find a way to open a window so other people can care about it the same way you do. If I had come to people and said, I'm going to do a story about a cannibalistic demon who loves Anthony Bourdain and Indian food, and this is going to be a comic. People would have been like, "What the hell is that?" But there's a way to get people to care about it. There's a window, and I think that's part of the joy of it is understanding how human beings tick and why they care about certain things. Whereas with the superhero stuff, the challenge is to make yourself care about it. Like yeah, okay, look, there have been a gajillion superheroes stories about superheroes punching each other. So the punchy is always going to be there. Why am I writing this one? Why is this book going to be in any way different or interesting? And that has to come from you as a creator. Like this is another thing I rub up against often. People are like, don't insert yourself into stories, right? Um, which is a very funny thing to say because that inherently that's what good writing is. Good writing is a writer bringing their point of view to something, right? I mean, it's not me who's saying it. I haven't made this discovery. If you look at Raymond Carver, he said the job of a writer is to take something mundane and make it feel new and interesting and fantastic again. Whether that's a beautiful sunset on the horizon, which people have written about for hundreds of thousands of years, or it's an old shoe lying on the corner of some carpet, and then you can look at it and find a way to make it feel important, meaningful, new. Then that's you and bringing yourself to the story, and that has always been the endeavor.
I love that. I love that. That kind of brings me to New Gods, which we're on issue 4 right now. If I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, the first arc is going to be about 12 issues, but I read somewhere that you have plans for up to 3 years. Is that true?
I do, and the book's done well enough. The numbers are good.
Yeah.
Um, So we shall see what DC's plans are with the bigger picture going forward. But yeah, I do have plans for a year or two at the very least. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been pretty amazing. And when we talk about kind of the history of New Gods with Jack Kirby and everything that was going on during that time when it was
Mm.
created, that kind of goes to, I think, a little bit related to what you were talking about, whether you're inserting or you're taking whatever is going on at the moment and then utilizing that as a base for that story. I don't know if a lot of people realize this, but when New Gods was created,
Yeah.
right, the whole world was in turmoil and
Yeah.
he was able to take
I mean,
every.
has there been a more obvious analogy for fighting fascism and mind controlling forces and whatnot? So yeah, I don't think people understand when they say. I mean, forget something that as overt as that. I mean, people to me, Frank Miller is one of the greatest sort of comic book creators to have ever existed. And you can read every Frank Miller book, including the bad ones, and then go, yeah, okay, I see what you were thinking when you wrote this. And I think that's part of the joy of it. You have to understand that every story is a piece of a writer slash artist's soul in some way. It's when it's when the work is soulless that you should really start worrying about the health of a genre or medium.
That's such a good point. Well, I feel like New Gods is playing a major role in everything that DC is trying to do between the Prime
Mhm.
Universe and the Absolute Universe, because this is one of the only titles I believe that will eventually touch both of those at the same time if it hasn't already started. Can you kind of
Sure.
talk a little bit about, as much as you can, obviously, without giving too much away in the
Yeah.
first arc?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm writing issue 8 or 9 of it right now. And around then, it pretty overtly starts touching on the idea that there are these two universes and somehow they are connected. And how that connection manifests itself is perhaps a thing that comes further down the line. But certainly by the end of these 12 issues, it will be very solidly obvious to anyone reading, going, okay, what's going on? Um, I will say that the books have already seeded some of this in as early as issue one. And not a lot of people realized it, but we did tell retailers how the two universes were represented. So we've actually shown the two universes all the way back in issue one, um, which is just a fun thing to do. But yeah, no, the New Gods has certainly been central because Darkseid has been central, and you can't have a Darkseid story that is central and meaningful without having a New God story that's central and meaningful. So I think that connection exists. Darkseid's absence certainly plays a huge role in the events that are happening in New Gods. And the events of the New Gods, especially with where things are headed now. I think issue four is out, so it's pretty obvious
Yeah.
what's happening with New Genesis and
Exactly.
potentially what could be happening with the New Gods there,
Yeah.
given some of the solicits. And so I think people will start seeing those connections manifest pretty soon.
Yeah. Now, jumping into the new gods, my assumption is you were pretty familiar with all those characters already and everything that has taken place in the past. Were you able to incorporate some of that, or with everything that's going on with the absolute universe? And I mean, I think right now, the DC, the changes that they have made as a DC fan first, I always grew up with
Hmm.
DC. I am loving All In. I am loving Absolute, and I feel finally DC is getting kind of the light that it needs, the shining on everything that's happening. So as a DC fan, I'm
Sure.
so excited. If you look at the top
Good, good.
10,
I'm glad.
DC has
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 constantly now in the top 10, which is awesome. But anyways, can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
About which part?
Just about the characters, the development of those characters, how
Oh,
much
right.
you take in
So
from the past.
yeah, so my history with comics is a little bit weird. I didn't really read them a lot as a kid. I mean, I read them, but they were more of the European Phantom, Mandrake, Flash Gordon, Tintin, Asterix the Gaul kind of stuff. I only got into the American stuff through reading Vertigo. So I'd read Sandman, I'd read Watchmen, and that's the kind of stuff that got me into reading American comics. In fact, I think my first appearance of Batman as an adult in comics is when he appears in Sandman. Um, I mean, I had read, Batman books as a kid, but I just kind of dropped off. So I wasn't aware of the Kirby stuff, only in that, okay, there are these characters that show up, and apparently Jack Kirby created them. And then I read somewhere, and I'm the kind of creator or I'm the kind of reader who, when I find one thing that interests me, I kind of pull at every thread and go read all of the other stuff around it, right? So I fell in love with comics because of Sandman. So then when I realized that, the Sandman book only happened because Alan Moore recommended the creative team to Karen Berger. I went, okay, I wonder who Alan Moore is. So I read who all of Alan Moore, or I'm still trying to read everything he did. Then I read somewhere that Grant Morrison was this creator who had criticized Alan Moore's work in Wizard magazine. And I went, I wonder who that is. And I read all of Grant. So that's kind of how I read the comics. So in one of those Alan Moore bits I had read, I read that he got excited about comics because of the kind of stuff Jack Kirby was doing. And I went, okay, well, I should read Jack Kirby then. And I went and read pretty much the entire Fourth World omnibus at that point. It's a bit scattered. I was like, what is happening? I'm not entirely sure because I wasn't particularly following the reading order, if you will. But the thing that struck me the most is Jack Kirby's work is like catnip to a good writer because Kirby was this kind of machine who would have 5 million ideas in every issue. And he would drop them like, here's 3 ideas in one panel. Here's 2 ideas. And each of those ideas you could pick and go like, cool, I'm just going to expand on this and it will be an entire book on its own. Um, and I think that kind of stuff is very exciting to a writer because when it comes to reinvigorating these things, you go like, okay, cool. There's all of these gaps that I can fill because Kirby's kind of left them open in this gigantic mythology he's created. And that's kind of what I'm doing. So there are bits from the past that are in the book. Certainly, all of the introductory guest sequences touch on things. So, for example, the one that just came out has him building a giant mother box in the heart of New Genesis, which
Yeah.
is something I've put in there. But the idea that Atenai and Himon and Highfather were there when New Genesis was first built came from Jack Kirby. So you see, I'm taking something he dropped in as a throwaway, casual one panel, and then I went, okay, I'm going to create a whole scene around this moment because it plays into what I'm doing with the story now. Similarly, there's been this history of Light Ray and the Black Racer always racing against each other and chasing each other. And this is part of what Jack Kirby created. Now, using that as a way to talk about how hope will always escape death is a easy thing to do because that gap has been left there for me. So that's kind of been my approach.
I love that. That's so cool, man. I love that. Well, let's jump into Resurrection, man, because this is one of those characters. I'll be honest with you, as a DC fan, I was not familiar with this character. And so when I
Sure.
saw this, I was like,
You
how do
and you and about 90% of the comics reading.
yeah. So I felt kind of embarrassed calling myself a DC fan and not really knowing this. So I did go back and I know there was that, I think it was a six-part series 20 something years
Yeah.
ago
Yeah.
that first came out, which was awesome. I think, was it Dan Abnett, I think was the
Yeah,
creator.
Dan Abnett and Andy Land. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I looked into it, but then I read it. Rant, this thing is freaking awesome, man. I actually just did a post right now on my Instagram. Guys, you got to read this, man. This thing is
Thanks.
phenomenal, man.
Yeah,
I love that it's Black Label or Vertigo today, which probably
sure.
felt really good for you because you're allowed to kind of do some things that maybe,
Yeah.
DC All In and everything that
Yeah,
they.
yeah. I don't think this would be a story that lives well in the main continuity, if you will. Yeah.
I mean, how fun was
Um,
kind of dig into this character? And like you said, you
so
kind of had
so
an idea already, right?
yeah, yeah, and honestly, like you shouldn't feel so bad about calling yourself a DC fan because full disclosure, the way I came up with this story was I went, okay, I'm gonna be writing some stories at DC. I should probably familiarize myself with some DC characters. So I went and bought like a DC Who's Who.
Yeah.
I was just flipping through them when I found this character called Resurrection Man. And I was like, that's a cool name for a character. I wonder what he does. And literally, I read that Who's Who page, and about, I don't know, 2 minutes later went, I have a cool idea for this character that I should write. And immediately pitched it. And I told you Jamie's response to that. But I love that kind of character. Like, to be very honest, because I do much better when I have a story I want to tell. And it just so happens that I found the right character to tell it with, if you will. Um, so that's kind of how that pitch came together. And so not a lot of people realize this, but that first page that Butch Guice has drawn in the
Yeah.
book, that's meant to look like the Resurrection Man Who's Who page.
Yeah, exactly. It does look like that too. And
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time on that. Well, maybe we could show that one because I don't think we're giving anything away. But yeah,
yeah.
I loved it, man. Because I was like, who the hell is this? And so I picked it up because I saw your name on it. Like you said, Ram's name is on it. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna pick that up. And then I saw that. I'm like, dude, this character sounds awesome, man. Just
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that first page is literally how I learned about the character as well. So and I love that you can do that with comics, you know? Like if you go to the next page, you realize it's a kid reading a comic and seeing that Who's Who page. And that will be important later on. So um I love doing stuff like that. I think comics is such a great medium to where you can do meta commentary like that. Um, so yeah, don't feel bad at all. Like I literally found out about the character on a Who's Who page and
I
went, I should write a story about this. Um, but I love stories, so it's very easy for me to fall in love with characters that I don't have a lot of history with.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, especially in a character like this that doesn't have a lot of continuity and a lot of people don't.
Actually, weirdly, this character has such a complex continuity, and it's
Really
part of what attracted me to this character. Yeah,
interesting.
because there was an original version of the character, right? That was the original series that Dan and Andy wrote. And then they wrote a second series for the New 52 that retconned his origins. Um, and then I read somewhere that the original character they came up with was a reference to um, being asked to create a series at Marvel, and then realizing that a similar character already existed in the DC universe.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, DC had a character called Immortal Man
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
a long time back. Um, and so they were building on. So they when they came in, they were like, we have to make this character. We can't make it too similar to that guy. Um, and so there's an interesting bit there. And then add on to the top of that the fact that he showed up in Morrison's DC 1 million, where he gets like a one-shot issue.
Really.
And so that exists. And I love doing this with continuity where I come in and I'm writing the story. And for the purposes of this story, all of that happened, including the retcon.
Interesting.
And somehow in the story, we're going to show you how the original origin and the retcon are both true at once.
Wow, cool.
Um, and so, and I love doing stuff like that because only in comics, or rather, I should say, only with this kind of mythological storytelling can you do that, right? Um, the other thing that I got really excited about with his continuity stuff is also the fact that um, it's been insinuated that his origins were wrong in the original book. So he's like, I'm Resurrection Man. A secret organization did some stuff to me, and now I can't die. And then Phantom Stranger shows up at some point and goes, actually, you've been alive a lot longer than you think you have. And then that's never explored or referenced in any of the stories later on. So I just went, well, great. That's a story to tell. So, Phantom Stranger will show up in this book at some point. So
That's so cool, man. Yeah, but what's unique about him is how he dies. Like, say
yeah.
that he was struck by lightning, all of a sudden, as he's resurrected, right?
Yeah,
Some
he's
of
gonna
that
have
gets,
lightning powers. Yeah.
yeah, it comes like he continuously builds all these different powers depending on how he died, right? Especially if it was some sort of
Yeah.
tragedy or something, which is, I just love the character itself. Like, I'm so,
But that's the great thing. Like you can go so many directions with that. Like when Morrison took the character and did a story with him, he put like a space slug on his hand that had the ability to kill him in a zillion different ways. And so he could choose how he died and so come back with powers that were useful to him in that which was one way to go. And then, I went the other way where I went like, great, what if he gave all of it up and just died like a regular normal person?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
And
that's,
then that gives him powers that come unexpectedly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it's such a cool character, and I'm so glad that I was introduced to it. I was just looking at my comic store going through. I'm like, what the hell is a Resurrection Man? And I saw your name on. I'm like, well, if he's gonna come on, I should probably read this. And then I read it. I'm like, holy crap,
Good.
man, this thing is freaking awesome, man. And then Anon, on the art,
Yeah.
incredible, and then Spicy Mike there, man, with his colors, man. What a great thing
Spicy.
to have going on there.
When I was working with Mike Perkins and Mike Spicer on Swamp Thing,
Yeah.
that's what we did. We
Yep.
had a channel where it was Rom V with Perky and Spicy.
That's so
Yeah, no,
cool.
Mike's great. I've always loved working with him. He's very collaborative, very receptive to ideas. Anand's fantastic. Obviously, I worked with him on the very first comic he had ever drawn, and so to see him kind of become a staple of that sort of industry is nice to see as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's so cool. And then do we know how many issues
It's going
Resurrection?
to be six, yeah, it's going to be 6 issues, and it's a complete story told in 6 issues. So, um, Well, I say complete story, but you'll see what I mean.
Okay,
Stories
sounds.
are stories are cyclical anyway, so
Yeah, more to come then. More to come on that. Yeah, is there a hope that maybe you get an opportunity to revisit this character, and do you already have other stories that you want to tell?
not really. Like I said, like I came up with this story first off of a Who's Who page, so I know the start, middle, and finish of the story. And I'm one of those people who doesn't particularly like the idea of like, hey, it's successful, so many people read it or so many people enjoyed it. We should just do another. Nah, it's a good thing. It's finished. Let's go do something else. Yeah.
I have a feeling if it does well, though, someone's gonna have to pick it up. That's just how kind of comics works, and then we'll get.
I'm sure someone else will. Like look, there hadn't been a Swamp Thing book in a long, long time before the Mikes and I took on Swamp Thing. Um, and
Another
then
great
since
series, by the
then,
way. Another
yeah,
great.
and then since thank you. And since then, he's been a staple, at least in and around the DCU. I think he teamed up with the Titans for a while or something, and it
A little
was it
bit.
was Levi.
I think G. Willow Wilson did a one shot not too long ago
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Poison Ivy, which one of the best one shots that we've had in a long time. And it was really cool to see
yeah.
something done with Swamp Thing. So that was real.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's the nature of comics and this kind of grand tapestry storytelling. I'm always honored when people are like, "Hey, I want to pick up this character and do it based off of what you did," which is great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if there's things that you're kind of working on that you're allowed to talk about. Do you have any other ideas for other characters that you can kind of share that maybe you've taken to DC, or is that kind of on the down low for now?
I mean, look, there's characters that I've talked to DC about, and there's mutual interest in doing something with it. And then obviously, I'm gonna be working on a book at one of their sort of new initiatives. So we will talk about that when that comes up. Um, but I'm also just like I've been doing the superhero stuff since 2019, pretty much. So I'm in that place where I'm like, you know what? I want to go away, do some other stuff. Refresh my brain with some new ideas as well, and come back to this in some time. So yeah, there's definitely more I want to do with these characters and these stories, but um, it's also good for me to go away and stare at the sky for a couple of years and come back.
So does that mean more creator-owned stuff that maybe we could see from you in the near future?
Yeah, there will be some creator-owned stuff. Like I'm working on a distillery book with Joel Jones that will come out. I've got plans and ideas to do more books. I can say it with Jorge Fornes. We
Yeah.
might be doing something together.
We have this too with Dan Waters.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, that
recently
already
too.
came out. Lawrence Campbell on the art and mine, and Sumit Kumar with Dan.
Yeah.
And that was cool. We did I don't think that's ever been done before, where two comics are telling one or three stories, depending on how you look at it. Um,
Very cool
and
idea.
so so there will be more weird sort of eccentric creator owned stuff like that from me. I'm also doing stuff in other mediums now, which I wasn't when I first started out. So I've written for video games, some of which are releasing soon, and so
Oh
that will
wow.
be pretty cool. And then I've done stuff for animation, and I will be doing more there. And I'm also adapting some of my own work to film.
Oh wow.
Um, and there are opportunities to do that beyond writing as well. So I might be making some of my own films, which sounds weird to say considering I was like, hey, I'm gonna quit engineering and go do this other thing. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, it's been an eventful few years. And my intention was never to be just doing one medium at any point in time. I started off writing prose actually. So um, yeah, there's a part of me that is like, there's all this other stuff to do as well. We should go do it. So, and there's an excitement, to doing something that you haven't done before, and so it feels new and exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Now, is it much different in your approach to writing, say, a video game, a movie, and a comic book, or are the principles all pretty much the same?
Well, I mean, I tend to think of it as you're doing two things.
Okay.
A is you're creating a story, and storytelling fundamentally works similarly most places you go. But then B, you're expressing that story and that idea through a medium, and so you must learn the way a medium works, or you must learn how to break the way a medium works before you can actually go do something there. Like an easy analogy is like everybody understands how a chair works, right? It's not hard to think of like, okay, I can think of a chair. But it's really hard to be a good carpenter and make a good chair. That's because you have to learn carpentry. And I think the same is true of any medium. It's hard to be a comic book writer. It's hard to be a prose writer. It's hard to be a film and TV writer because you're learning different mediums and different tools, and you have to learn how to use all of them.
Yeah, yeah. Incredible. When you look at your career, is there one title that sticks out to you more, or one work that sticks out more than the others, or you don't think like that?
Not really. I don't think like that. I think when you say stick out, like it
One
depends
you're most
on
proud of, maybe. How about that?
none of them.
Really?
Yeah, because the pride is in the telling of the thing. There's no pride in having told it, you
Okay,
know?
makes sense.
Um, because that's a looking back in hindsight success thing.
Okay.
And like I said before, like success is a byproduct. The exciting part is when you're actually doing the telling to a point where I always mention this story whenever people ask me this. There was a time where I had just finished, or we had just finished working on Blue and Green, Anand, Aditya, John Pearson, and myself. And the last step in the process is always for Aditya to go back in once and make sure that the lettering is really tight because the lettering kind of sits on top of everything else. And so he had done that about 3 or 4 weeks after we had finished creating the thing. And he said, "Hey man, I lettered the whole thing, read it top to bottom, and it reads so well. Do you want to have a look at it before we send it off?" And my response to him was like, "I never want to see that thing again for a while. I'm done looking at it. We've been looking at it for a year and a half. I'm good. I've told my story. You go ahead and send it." So my brain had already checked out. Um, and I've been that way about most of my stories. I know people, and sometimes like people take objection to that, going like, "Hey, we made this book, and we've been invited to go talk about it at this place and this place, and you're not here. What's happening?" I'm like, "I'm making the next book. I'm done. Like I don't find particular like I've said everything I want to say in the work, and I don't find particular joy in sort of basking in the glow of having made a book, if you will."
Yeah, yeah. Well, incredible, Ramvi. I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything that you're doing, especially at DC.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy that these two titles have been killing it right now, man. This right here, I'm telling you, if you haven't picked it up, it's in your stores right now. I was surprised to see it, didn't know what it was. I picked it up, and I'm very happy that I did because the stories are incredible. And then obviously, issue 4 of the New Gods, which I feel is playing a very pivotal role in everything that's going on in the DC universe now. I don't know if you call this the center of everything that's going on, but it's tying two
Pretty
different
close.
universes
Yeah.
together. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an important title. So if you're enjoying everything that's going on right now in DC with the all new, with the absolute universe, you should be reading New Gods because it is man, I feel like it's the glue that's going to kind of bring things together. And I cannot wait to see how everything kind of ties in here in the new future, Ram. I'm so glad that you're on that title. And
Thank
man,
you.
just talking to other folks like me that love reading comic books, everyone is just singing the praises on the New Gods. So
Yeah,
congratulations.
I'm glad there are so many Kirby heads about, but also glad that like I was brought into comics off of contemporary work. And so glad that I'm bringing, or my work is bringing in readers who have never read New God stuff before and are going, well, this is pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on right now, Ronvi.
great.
I don't know, man. I appreciate it. Well, I want to be super respectful of your time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope we could do this again as
Yeah,
more work come out. I would love to have you back once the 6 issues are done with this. I know you'll be done with
gladly.
it, but man, I would love just to talk to you about it because this thing is phenomenal. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
get
listen, like it goes to some really strange places from there. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about when the 6 issues are done.
I love it, my friend. I love it. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you.
hanging out with me today. I wish you nothing but the best. Have a great weekend,
Thanks.
and
I
we will
appreciate
talk
it.
soon, my friend. Thank you so much, Ramvi.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.